Our first theme is sustainability, and I think that's a very, very good way to start. And I think it's a very important question for us to ask ourselves is how can we contribute to that? And our first speakers are Margaret McNamee from Lund University and Anne Steen Hansen from Frick Rise in Norway. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Matthias. We were asked to introduce ourselves to start off with. My name is, as Matthias said, Margaret McNamee. I am a professor of fire safety engineering at Lund University School of Engineering. And I began my interest or my career in fire safety in 1995. And at the time I was employed by RISE, the Research Institutes of Sweden, to open an entirely new field for the organization, looking at fire safety and the environment. Looking back, about a quarter of a century has passed actually since I began working in that field, and I think a lot has happened. When I first started, fire safety was about, or sustainability was about basically environmental friendliness, but I think it's much more today. Anne, would you like to present yourself?
Yes, I'm Anne Steen Hansen. I've been working with fire safety for 28 years. It's a man's age.
Yeah.
Yes. And now I'm a chief scientist at RISE Fire Research in Trondheim in Norway. And I'm also the director of the new Fire Research and Innovation Center, Frick, that I will present to you later on. And from August, I will start as a professor in fire safety engineering at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology. So I have many hats.
Yeah, a woman of many talents. And what we thought we would do, rather than just give a simple presentation of what does sustainability mean to us, that we maybe talk a little bit about it first. As I started off by saying, in the 90s, when I started working on fire safety and environment and the impact on the environment, then sustainability was more or less synonymous with environmentally friendly or environmental friendliness. What do you think of as sustainability these days, Anne?
Yes, well, I saw that sustainable development was first defined by the Brundtland Commission in their report, Our Common Future. And just to read it here, it says that sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And I think to me it's obvious that fire safety is also a very important factor to reach this goal, because fire is a destructive phenomenon and destruction is not compatible with sustainability. So sustainability means that we have to take care of what we have now, environment, nature, infrastructure, buildings, health, etc., to bring it on to future generations. And then we need to make it fire safe as good as we can.
So that sounds to me then that we're talking about life, the universe, and everything in one way. Sustainability is about taking a step back and taking a holistic view. Would you agree?
Yeah, it's very important, because now we are improving the world, we are making energy efficient buildings, but then we may introduce new problems, new challenges, increase fire risk, and we have to avoid that. So knowledge is very important.
So maybe we can say that in summary, when we're talking about sustainability and fire safety, it comes down to making sure that we don't solve one problem, say an environmental problem, and then create another, like a fire safety problem, or the opposite, that we save a fire safety issue, but actually create an environmental issue. So sustainability is system thinking.
Yes, I think so. And you can also think of this curve that Anders was showing in his presentation. It's going up and down. We just try to keep it on a good level.
Exactly. So instead of solving one thing and fire safety increases, forgetting about what the problem is and fire safety decreases before we increase it again, to try and think systemically so that we can actually keep the fire safety level high all the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're both going to be talking thanks, Anne.
Yeah, thank you.
for helping me try and tease out what do we mean by sustainability as part of the start of this presentation. Anne and I are going to talk from slightly different aspects about what do we mean by sustainability and how do fire safety and sustainability work together, basically. So, I don't know how to start my presentation. There, Fire Safety in a Sustainable Society is the name of this session, obviously. And what we were talking about before is summarized here on the slide. You can see the definition from the Brundtland Commission that Anne read out. A sustainable society meets our present needs without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. So clearly it doesn't mean that we need to forsake our own needs here and now in order to have a sustainable society, but we do need to think in terms of the fact that future generations also will need to be able to meet their own needs. And the second point there, in terms of the fact that we need to think holistically in order to be able to think sustainably, to think from a systemic point of view. And it's become more and more common to actually divide sustainability up into 3 dimensions. As I said, when I started in the 90s, then we typically spoke only of one of these dimensions. We spoke about the ecological dimension or environmental friendliness. But in order for something to be truly sustainable, then we need to think both in terms of economic sustainability, ecological sustainability, and also social sustainability, and how these things interact with each other in terms of fire safety is necessary. So we can't think simplistically, we need to think multidimensionally. So moving on to my specific presentation about fire safety and sustainability, are they friend or foe? Do we see them as actually reinforcing each other? Can fire safety be something that is reinforced by a sustainability way of thinking, or is it actually something that works against each other, that may be contradictory? And I hope that through the presentation that I give now, I'll be able to come to some kind of a conclusion that we can agree on whether or not. I won't tell you right now. Maybe you can guess what I hope the conclusion will be, but you'll see towards the end. But in order to start, I think we need to have a common understanding of what is the fire safety problem that we're facing here today. So, the fire problem. The World Health Organization estimates that on an annual basis, somewhere close to 180,000 people are burned in fires or due to burn deaths annually. Now, not all of those are what we would traditionally think of as fires in a Western European type of way of thinking. A lot of them have to do with cooking fires in poor countries where you have poor situations that are not similar to the situations we have here. But even from, say, a European perspective, we have an annual number of deaths of around about 3,500 people dying in fires every year, and around about 70,000 people being injured in fires. So clearly it's a problem that we need to address and that we need to find solutions for. So we can establish here that fire safety is important. In developed countries, we typically say, and I've looked for references, there are some references, but I haven't seen a lot of specific calculations about the fact that we estimate fire costs, direct fire costs, to be around about 1% of the gross domestic product in most developed countries. The NFPA has actually done some work where they've made some estimates and tried to include costs other than direct costs here, and they've come up with estimates that would be close to double that, so approaching 2% of the gross domestic product if you try to include some of the indirect costs of fires. And really, we don't know. I mean, there's more work that needs to be done in trying to understand where do we draw the boundaries of what are the direct and indirect costs of fires. So they could potentially be even higher. Insurance company statistics are also a wealth of data in terms of what are the cost of fires. And recently, Swiss Re released, which is a reinsurance company, released data about the cost of the wildland fires that occurred in the US in 2017. And they found that the costs there were in excess of $14 billion. So we're seeing huge costs associated with wildland fires in recent years. Now, 2018, the fire issues that we saw not only in Sweden, I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but also in the US, were even greater. And I've seen numbers recently when I was in the US last week, where they're estimating the cost of wildland fires in the US for 2018 to be close to $16.5 billion. Huge. Difficult to understand that scale of cost. Insurance statistics also show that in the built environment, so not just the wildland environment, then a large portion of the costs in terms of annual business and interruptions globally come from fires. So this is not an economically sustainable picture, I think we can agree, at the very least. But the situation that we have in the future is likely to change. One of the questions that came to the speakers just before this breakout session was whether can we predict what the future will look like? I think when Kathleen and Anders were talking about the situation today and in the future. And I think that we can certainly agree that the future is going to be different to the situation that we have today. And some information that we have here on the slides. I don't think there's a pointer here, is there? No. In here. But the picture that we have here at the top of the screen shows United Nations population growth statistics, where we can see that according to some estimates, we may actually see a plateau or a maximum in the global population somewhere around about 2050 or 2100, but we still have an increasing population at the moment. The picture below shows what we would expect to have in terms of the demographics, so the age distribution for the population. These are actually statistics for 2017, so what the actual population age distribution was on this side, and then for 1950. And we see that we're moving towards an aging society. And the picture is likely to increase in this vein so that we're going to get perhaps something that approaches even a kite type of distribution, where you would have a top-heavy distribution towards the older ages. And this is going to create a whole lot of sustainability-related issues. Also associated with the increase in population, we see an increase in urbanization. Urbanization is something that I think many people think that there was a peak in perhaps some years ago, but in fact we see continued increase in urbanization. Large cities are becoming larger, and there are increases in the number of cities with populations over 1 million in the world at the moment still. Now, in developed countries, this can mean things like you have crowding, we can have increases in high-rise buildings and so on, whereas in undeveloped countries, we're seeing an increase in things like informal settlements and the fire safety implications of that. But in general, we can say with the increasing population, with the changing demographics, and with the continued urbanization, then we have great fire safety challenges that also relate to sustainability. So for the rest of this presentation, which is only about 5 minutes left, then I'm going to talk about fire safety and sustainability in 3 main categories. One of which relates to climate change, the next related to resiliency and the need for increased resiliency in society, and the final one related to fire safety associated with new materials, products and services. Because I think these are the 3 key areas where fire safety basically comes into contact with sustainability. So in terms of climate change and resiliency, climate change is not only about global warming. Climate change, as we're seeing globally at the moment, is to a large degree about the fact that we're having increased weather volatility. So in some areas of the world, we will see increased temperatures, which is going to lead to things like increased forest fires. In other parts of the world, we may actually see decreases in temperature or increases in storms. So the way that climate change is expressed in different climates is going to be, or in different countries is going to be different. And we need to be able to learn to deal with the increased number of potential natural hazards that we would be exposed to. And this relates very closely to resiliency. How well equipped are we as a society, as a response organization, to be able to respond to large natural disasters? We had a speech just before the break here about the forest fires in Sweden, and the fact that we had unprecedented numbers of forest fires in Sweden, which create or place a huge strain on the response organization. If we were to, for example, have not only fires occurring, but also large flooding occurring, because we have multiple storms occurring at the same time that we've had essentially hot weather, then this could place additional strain on resources that are already under stress. And trying to understand and predict what kinds of problems would be associated with that is something that's very important for us to be able to ensure that we have a resilient society for the future. MSB has actually just recently awarded a project to Lund University where we will be looking into the question of both crowding of natural disasters, where we would have different types of disasters occurring close to each other, either in time or in space, but are otherwise unrelated, or cascading of natural disasters, where you have one disaster leading to another, for example, causing additional stress on society. So for improved resiliency, we need to be able to have improved pre-incident planning, improved incident response, and also improved post-incident performance in order to ensure that we have the best possible situation to deal with our changing world. In terms of new materials, products and services, I think that there are three main aspects that we need to be looking at in order to consider fire safety. And this is both the need for new robust models in order to be able to quantify and understand how the three dimensions of sustainability, both ecological, economic and social, how they are affected by the fire safety considerations that we make. We need to have better data in order to be able to input to models, but also in order to be able to understand the fire safety situation. And we need to have better models in order to be able to understand firefighting choices that we make, so tactics in response to actual incidents, how they impact on the environment or how they impact on the different dimensions of sustainability. In terms of that first point, there's been some work done over the years to develop some models, one of which is called the Fire Life Cycle Assessment Model, which tries to incorporate the fact that fires can take place as part of a potential product life cycle outcome in order to be able to understand what are the environmental implications of fire safety considerations, or what are the fire safety considerations, implications of environmental considerations. In the same way, we developed and worked on a cost-benefit type of model, which tried to apply the same kind of thinking, but instead of looking at ecological dimensions or impacts of fire safety, to actually try and get a handle on what are the cost implications of fire safety. These types of models need to be worked on more and applied to new kinds of situations or products, but also we need to extend them to include things like what are the social impacts of fire safety in order to truly be looking at all of the dimensions of sustainability. In terms of data, at the moment we've just recently started a project working together with the National Research, the Research Foundation as part of the NFPA, has funded to develop a research roadmap looking at what is the environmental impact of fires, not just the direct environmental impact, but also the indirect environmental impact, with a particular focus on looking at economic models of trying to understand what the costs are of fires. And here we're going to be developing, trying to identify what are the gaps in information that we need to have more research in order to fill. And on the third point, with firefighting and understanding what are the what is the impact of different firefighting tactical choices on the environment, there's also another project which is ongoing at the moment as a collaboration between Lund University, Rice, and a consulting agency or consultancy called Brandskyddslaget, looking at trying to measure the impact, environmental impact, or the impact of fire on the environment. The project is actually producing a tool called the Fire Impact Tool, which brings together both an environmental impact or an environmental risk assessment aspect and a life cycle assessment aspect. And the project leader is here at the moment. Francine, you could wave. And she will be available to demonstrate the tool and what it can do in terms of helping fire services make decisions about tactical choices and what their impact is on fires for the future in the Brandforsk exhibit. And this project is funded by Brandforsk and by the NFPA. So we thank you for that. So finally, just summing up, fire safety and sustainability, are they friend or foe? And I think my answer would certainly be that they need to be seen as friends. They're something that can reinforce each other. Consider the cost of not considering fire safety. If we don't consider fire safety, then the cost to the environment, the cost economically, and the social costs of being involved in a fire, losing your home, losing access to an environment is unthinkable. So they need to be seen as being friends. We need a multidisciplinary approach in order to be able to attack these issues because of the complexity of trying to understand how does fire safety impact on economics, on the environment, or on social settings. And I think that fire safety can actually be an enabler. We can use fire safety to leverage different types of innovations and leverage a multifaceted approach in order to be able to provide fire safety in a sustainable world. Thank you.
Well, then it was me. So I think Margaret gave a very good background for my presentation, for the reason that this Fire Research and Innovation Center is needed and will be useful, because I hope you now can agree with me that fire safety is an obvious part of a sustainable society. And in that context, I will present this initiative that is a great step towards this goal. So here is some information about the center. We have 3 academic partners. It's Rice Fire Research, where I come from, the host institution, with me as director, and we also have the university, Norwegian University of Science and Technology, and SINTEF, which is a large research organization in Norway. And in addition, we have 17 partners from industry and public administration, and among them we have 3 partners, international partners. So the funding now is approximately 7 million euros over 5 years from the Research Council of Norway, and also a considerable funding from partners, both in cash and in working hours. So that's great. So funding of fire research has been sparse and rare in Norway, as in most other countries of the world. So we were extremely happy when we got the message from the Research Council that we had got funding for 5 years at least of fire research. And here you can see the happy management group of the center. We had the kickoff 1st of March. So these are our representatives from Rice, SINTEF, and NTNU, with center director laughing. So and this was a day of bubbles and cake and celebration speeches and flames. And the partners were very enthusiastic, and the interest we felt was considerable. So now the hard work is starting. We can't use all the money for cake and bubbles. So the main goal of FRIC is improved evidence-based decision-making and solutions for fire safety and fire protection in the built environment. And I think that this fits very well with Brandforsk's new vision, bringing more knowledge into decision in the fire areas. So decisions could be what kind of clothing should the fire brigades use, what kind of extinguishing media or systems, what building materials, construction methods, or how should health and fire service be organized to take care of people of risk. So that's a great goal. And we also have a long-term goal, and that is that this shall be a strong research and innovation center that is active and evolving in incalculable future. That means that we shall live forever after, and when the money from the Research Council ends, then we shall be able to stand on our own feet, get funding from other sources, get paying partners. So yeah, I believe in this. The research in FRIC is divided into 4 larger projects called work packages in the researcher language. So we have the first one, evidence-based decision-making within fire safety. We have one project where we will monitor the work in the rest of the project to see that we are filling the knowledge gaps, that we are not doing something that others have already done better than us. But we will also have a project with learning from fire investigation. So I think that will bring also data to the fire community. Fire dynamics and modeling, that is the most theoretical topic in FRIC. That's about calculations, it's about more physics and chemical research, smoldering fires, pyrolysis, toxic gases from in fire smoke. We have a work package on building technology and design, novel construction materials, but also new use of existing materials. Timber structures is a big issue today, and also the use of building information models, that using data system for systematizing also fire information on buildings. And the last work package is on fire safety measures and also new technology in buildings. So we have a variety of topics: fire extinguishing, also personal protective equipment for firefighters, fire safety measures for dwellings, and especially looking at people at risk, and then building integrated smart technology, both for producing energy, storing energy, but other smart things you can put into your homes. And this figure shows that, well, the yellow arrow shows that these factors shall be considered in every project. That fire prevention is this project helping to prevent fires, because that is the easiest way to save money. Impact of measures, the effect, how efficient is one extinguishing system compared to another one. And also fire safety for high-risk groups is a topic that should be considered in this project. And then, of course, dissemination and communication of knowledge is very important. And the target groups, it's a very wide span from the regular man in the street to high-level scientific persons, and everything in between, like fire brigades, manufacturers of building products, health service, whatever. So this is just showing the organization. Well, just to say, it's called a research and innovation center, but we are not going to build any buildings or laboratories. So it's just a virtual organization. But we have a general assembly where all partners are present. Then we have the executive board taking decisions, and the center management, the people you saw in the first photo doing the daily, day-to-day management of the research. And we have a scientific committee that will help us to see that we are filling real knowledge gaps and that we are on the right track. And it's no secret that Björn is a part of this committee, so we rely on you, Björn. And we have also this bubble of followers that are people that are very interested to be a part of it, but has no money or no time to invest. Innovation is very important, and that is also reflected in our name, Fire Research and Innovation Center, because the thought is that it must be possible to do things within fire safety in a smarter and more efficient way today with all technology we have, all the knowledge we have. And in this way, we are talking about different types of innovation. Product innovation, that is making new products. That could be a material, could be a detector, whatever. It's also market innovation. It's making new market for the partners in the center. Process innovation, that is doing things in a new way, in a more efficient way. And then you also have organizational innovation, which means that you can organize, like the fire brigade, fire service in another way, more efficient way, maybe together with a health service. So that are examples of innovations that we will try to obtain through our work. So I will give you some examples of topics we will work with in this center. So learning from fire investigations. I personally find that very interesting because this is the kind of case studies we can do. So, and this photo is from one of the winter fires in Norway in 2014, Lærdal. And we had a project where we investigated this fire. And, well, they never found the cause of the fire, so that is unknown. But it happened a lot when the fire started, how the fire spread from building to building, what fire brigades did, what the volunteers did, how the organization around this was, how the fire eventually was stopped. So we think we can learn a lot from investigating fires, and the fires will be selected from the wishes from the partners, from topics that are studied in other projects. Fire-safe timber structures is also a big project here, because wood is in many ways a sustainable material. It has very many good properties, but it's also combustible, so we need to know how to build fire-safe buildings. And now it's a competition in the world to build the highest and biggest wooden buildings, and I think the last record is taken by a Norwegian company. So, we have a lot of experience from building with wood from later years, and we can use that experience and also new knowledge to build safe also with wood. Fire extinguishing, another topic, and this covers both systems, installations inside buildings, outside buildings, but also systems and methods for fire fighting. So this will also be a very big project in Frick. Smart technology. Technology can make buildings smart and efficient, like solar cells, solar panels on the roof, like you see here. But as we said earlier today, that by introducing smart things like this, you can also introduce fire risks. So we need to be sure that having a large area of solar panels on your roof doesn't introduce fire safety issues. And also smart technology for use in dwellings, smoke detectors, how to detect fires fast and smart. And then I'm sure that you can use new technology to do things smarter than than the regular smoke detectors today. And then the last example is about personal protective equipment for firefighters. And we are continuing on a project we have been working on, and that is to develop or to test firemen's clothing to see how they can protect the skin from particles, that particles are not from smoke are not penetrating the textiles. And that is very important because the smoke particles can mean a health problem. They can induce allergies and cancer. So we need a test to qualify clothing for firefighters. So this is my last slide. And you see there is a web address at the bottom there. It's not active yet, but it will be. And on this website, we will put a lot of information on the partners from project reports when we eventually get some reports. And I also say, if you're interested to know more about Frick, interested to become a partner or interested to collaborate with the center, because we will also collaborate with international organizations and institutes. So please contact me. That will be nice. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, both of you. Please stay at the stage, please. And you can also get up here, Margaret.
Yes.
Do we have any questions or reflections from the audience? Thomas has a microphone. He can lend you that. Any hands up? I guess. Birgitte?
So this one is for you, Margaret.
Yeah.
So you talked about how important it is, fire safety, sustainability, etc. And we're good at talking about that in the fire community. How well are they at talking about fire safety in the sustainability community, and what do we need to do to raise that awareness?
Good question. I'm not sure that it's really easy to answer in terms of that. I'm not sure that I'm deeply embedded into the sustainability community. But I would actually say, in the contact that I do have with that side of the community, through the life cycle assessment, for example, then typically, unfortunately, fire safety is just not high on their agenda. It's seen to be something that is a little bit of an unusual topic for them. There's a lot of interest as soon as you start talking about it, so I think that if we can actually make the effort to go and speak to the typical sustainability people, then they are open to having a dialogue about it. But that requires people from the fire safety community to actually go outside of their comfort zone in the fire safety field and put themselves in situations that are not specifically fire safety orientated. So that's a suggestion to myself as well. I should do that. We should all do that.
That's a very good advice. Any more questions or reflections? I actually have one question. In Sweden, when we look at who's killed in fires, we find very, very strong socioeconomic factors. And when we look at the schools that burn in Sweden, we find very, very strong socioeconomic factors. Do we underestimate the socio part of fire safety in this?
I think that we don't estimate it at all. In terms of that, even though we've typically worked with models about life cycle assessment for understanding the environmental impact, or life cycle costing to understand the cost, or cost benefit types of models to understand the cost, we haven't actually tried to understand what is the cost of not including these socioeconomic groups in our discussion, basically, about fire safety. There's some work been done on it. I mean, the University of Malmö, the University of Karlstad have certainly done some interesting research looking into the socioeconomic groups and how they are extra exposed, if you will, to fire risk. But then trying to actually put a value on if the fire service were to become more engaged, or if some other part of the, government types of organizations were to become engaged in actually addressing these socioeconomic situations, could we see that as a benefit in terms of fire safety? Is that something that we should be incorporating into our cost benefit? That by avoiding fires in these groups, by having better preventative measures, then we could actually create a lot of value in society. That's something that we don't typically look at very much today.
Can we calculate the socio part?
You know, I think we could if we tried to look at it carefully, and it's certainly something that at Lund University we'd like to start looking at, and hope to find some opportunities for new research in that area.
What do you think?
I can just comment. I don't think in Norway that we are calculating on it, but there are lots of efforts to increase the fire safety in groups that are especially, at risk concerning fire, like drug, alcohol, elderly, handicapped. So the fire services are working together with the health services in many areas, and I think they have learned a lot, and there are very many good efforts. But taking it into a model like this and showing how much the society would gain from it, that would be very interesting.
Yeah, I think we need to do that. But we certainly recognize the risk groups. I think I was listening to a presentation a few weeks ago where the presenter was saying that we can almost identify who will be involved in a potentially fatal fire. Certainly in Sweden today, it's a very recognizable group of people that are definitely at risk. But to put a value and to work with this group, to put a value on trying to prevent those fires is something that we haven't tried to do yet, I'd say. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Oh, down there. Take the long leg, Thomas.
From the FDA in the UK.
Hi.
Everyone seems to measure. Can you hear me? Everyone seems to measure fire protection from the number of fatalities. And the problem is that the number of fatalities, generally, this is a factor in the UK, the number of fatalities is going down. So 20 years ago, we had nearly 2,000 fatalities from fires in the UK. Last year, the year before Grenfell, we had 263. It then went up by 71 to 334 last year. And the new statistics for this recent year are about to be published in August. So is it the case that actually we're measuring it by the wrong thing? Because what we're measuring it by is constantly going down. So the theory is we're all doing a really good job, and the fire service is doing a really good job. And the fire service in the UK has got smaller and smaller and smaller, but the number of fatalities still keeps going down. Is it not more sensible to count things in their environmental costs rather than in the fatalities, because it's the environmental costs that are actually having a much bigger impact, and the insurance costs, because although the number of fires are going down, the amount of money claimed on insurances is going up. Do you think that's worth thinking about as a European organisation?
Absolutely, I would definitely agree that that we do need to be looking at other costs than just looking at the number of fatalities or the number of injuries. And in order to be able to understand the fire problem, then we need to be willing to move beyond these simple measures that we've been working with for so many years, and actually see it as a little bit more complex problem, and be willing to embrace the complexity of it, if you will, in order to be able to understand what are we doing right and what are we doing wrong, or what could we do better.
Yes, and I think that is also done, but not as good as we could think of. But it's easy to count fatalities, so we could just continue doing that, but that's not a measure of the fire safety in the community. I agree.
But in fact, the project that the NFPA is funding at the moment, where I'm working on trying to produce this research roadmap where we can identify what are the gaps in knowledge we have in order to be able to do just what you're suggesting, basically. In order to be able to really understand what is the environmental cost of fires, or what is the environmental cost of fire safety, which are two slightly different questions, then we need to understand how do we go about it, what knowledge do we have today that we could apply to the question, and what knowledge are we lacking in order to be able to find a solution. The work has started, but hopefully I can stand here next year. No, not next year. You're not. It's not a new 100-year jubilee next year, but
50 years, turning 40 every year. Yeah.
The project will be finished towards the end of the year, so hopefully there'll be an opportunity to talk a little bit about what other research needs and what can we do as a next step.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think we have to wrap it up here, and we have some presents for you. And don't run away. No, thank you very much, and give them a big hand.
Wow.
Thank you.